Hello, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of Every Rockie Ever, a Colorado Rockies podcast, part of the Rocky Mountain Rooftop Network, which is also a proud member of the Fans First Sports Network. I am your host, Skyler Timmins, as always, joined here by my older brother, Dustin, who is wearing and repping his old CSU Pueblo Thunderwolves hat today.
Game authentic right here. Won me a few baseball games in this hat.
Yeah, then I don't think that's one of the nastier hats he's had in his in his career.
And we actually hated these ones because they were the low cut, the guys with the huge heads that never fit. It just sat on the top. And they're really, they're nothing like the nice flat brim new era hats and stuff like that. But and to rep some CSUP Thunderwolves.
Indeed. Good times. Those were always good times going to watch those games every once in a while when we'd come up. Because it was nice when it was just 2 hours away and we could come up and watch you pitch and then go home and then see you in the newspaper and it's a picture of not you pitching, even though the caption says it's you pitching.
I was actually cleaning out some stuff over the weekend and found a folder full of those clippings and stuff. So I took them to school today to show some of the kids. And what's funny is the kid that in that article, they put the action shot and it was him. And he actually went to the school that I teach at. And so it's just kind of one of those funny little things, but that's baseball, how it's part of our lives. And that's why we're here doing this.
Yeah. Small world, and there's always connections, and we just love baseball, despite how much grief it gives us sometimes. Whether it's coaching, playing, or watching, or even just talking about it. But as always, like we've mentioned before, this is Every Rockie Ever, where we go through the history of the Colorado Rockies and just talk about players. And had people just not come into the room that I'm recording in. And today, we've decided to focus on a catching tandem. They're in the late 90s, kind of notable ones. They're not the big names when you think of the Rockies pantheon of the catching position, but still notable guys who had some interesting tandem through their career together with the Rockies. And so we're going to be talking about Jeff Reed and Kirt Manwaring, who spent a lot of time together kind of managing the Rockies pitching staffs over the years between like 1996 and 1999. So kind of filling in that gap there. And I guess, Dustin, we can start with Jeff Reed since he was there first with the Rockies, and kind of hand it to you. Give us a quick little overview of Jeff Reed.
All right. My guy, Jeff Reed, what I always remember him, he was a right-handed catcher, but he batted lefty, and born in 1962 from Joliet, Illinois. He was originally drafted by the Minnesota Twins in the 1980 draft, straight out of high school. He made his major league debut in 1984, and his last game of his career was October 1st of 2000, when he was 37. During his major league career, these are the teams that he played for. For Minnesota, spent some time in Montreal, Cincinnati, the Giants. Then he came over to the Rockies as a free agent in 1996, and he played there until the halfway point of 1999 when he was actually released. And he signed on with the Cubs and played another year and a half and officially retired there in the year 2000. But with the Colorado Rockies, there we go. It was a total of 4 years. He ended up playing 365 games, and never any, all-star. Had a couple of good years offensively. He was really good, but he was known more as a defensive catcher. He was pretty solid throughout his career as a defensive, weapon. Um, and he actually in 1990 was a World Series champ with the Cincinnati Reds.
There you go. Worked out for him.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of cool to see that he seemed to be that still in that era with the Rockies where they were still trying to build up their homegrown system and still drafting players. And so I don't know, it seems like a lot during that 90s, that's where you'd get a lot of kind of these older guys just kind of catch on somewhere or just keep the dream alive, and Colorado would scoop them up, just use them as a veteran status and just kind of help the team keep above water while they're still trying to build up the minor league system in those early years. But he came over to the Rockies at 1996. He's 33 years old. And so not too shabby. He's definitely on the older end of the spectrum. But still, 1996 to get yourself a 33-year-old catcher to kind of be your main guy going forward there in Colorado after did he seem like kind of the one of the big moves or important pieces after that 95 season, or something that they really felt that they needed at that time?
Well, I think, after that 95 season, Joe Girardi went to the Yankees, the dreaded Yankees, and ended up winning a World Series with them right away, him and Charlie Hayes. And so that was cool for them. But, Joe Girardi was that solid. He's the Rockies, their first catcher, and so he left and Jeff Reed came in, which is surprising. Looking at those stats, he batted in his time with Colorado. He batted 286.
Mm-hmm.
We think of that. When have any Rockies catchers really hit for an average? He had one of those seasons where it was like, dang, that was a really good year. And I think that's what kind of bumped those stats up. But in those 4 years, in that time with the Rockies, he had 36 home runs, 134 RBI. That's pretty solid. 52 doubles. And so, that's pretty impressive when we look back at those stats. What I remember, with those Rockies, there was that, the Miracle 95 season wild card, and then, this change they brought some of the youth came up, and I think they really needed a veteran catcher to help, like you're saying, those homegrown pitchers and those guys that they had, those young kids, to get them, to have somebody behind the plate, good pitch caller, game manager. And I think Jeff Reed did a really good job, because his battery mates at those times during that 96 season was Jayhawk Owens. One of the coolest names ever in baseball. But, that's, once again, that's not any, great all-star.
Mm-hmm. And it's cool to see that he was definitely one of those guys that probably that persona or that stigma that was always rising up with, a guy's kind of been terrible offensively his whole career. Oh, and all of a sudden he finds new life in Colorado at Coors Field. And I wish we could say that nowadays still. But with kind of cool to see looking at those stats. He hit 265 in 1995 with the Giants. That jumped up to a 284 average, 96, 297 in 1997, then a 290 in 98. And then in 1999 was hitting 255. But you see that stretch, that 3-year stretch in Colorado where he's almost hitting 300. And as a catcher for the Rockies, you're like, dang, that's pretty good.
Oh, yeah. And the Rockies haven't had that in forever. We think of the Chris Iannetta, the average guy. I just remember him. He was in those certain spots, and he just blasts a home run.
Mm-hmm.
The Willeen Rosario, the baby bull, all I could either strike out or he blast one out into onto the concourse.
Mm-hmm.
And the Rockies just have never had that consistently, up until this year with Elias Diaz, up to this point in their season where he's hitting 330, 330 plus. But Jeff Reed, as we're talking, and we do this about our nostalgia and what we remember. And once again, we've told everybody, but we grew up in the middle of nowhere, didn't have cable TV. If we ever got lucky, they'd be on a Sunday or the Saturday afternoon baseball game on Fox, which hardly ever happened. But we grew up listening to the radio. You were born the year that he started playing for the Rockies,
Yeah.
and so you have no idea other than seeing him pop up on one of our old video games. And so, I remember Jeff Reed, like I said, that left-handed catcher. And for me as a kid, that was something interesting, is seeing a guy, that threw right-handed but batted lefty. For me as a little kid, and I was like, whoa, that's crazy. But I remember being super tough at the plate, and I was going back and trying to, when we get these guys in the 90s and stuff, there's not that much footage of these lesser known guys. But I did find the one highlight. They were playing, I think they were playing the Mets, and there was a play at the plate, a collision at home plate, and Jeff Reed, we don't see this anymore, these home plate collisions, and he's got it and just gets trucked, and he pops up, holds the glove out for got the guy out, bounced up, went into the dugout or whatever. But he's just a solid guy, and for playing in the majors for what was 17 years.
As a catcher.
Yeah, as a catcher. And that says a lot about you.
And that longevity, because with the catcher especially, you want that defense first. That's first and foremost. That's the most important thing you need from them. How do they handle pitching staff? How are they behind the plate? And then anything else with that offensively, you kind of hope for the best, and take what you get as a bonus. And I just was glancing over. In 1997, he hit 17 home runs. That was the most of his career, by almost double. You could add 1996 and 1998 together to get his 1997 home run total. And before coming to Colorado, his highest was 6 in 1993 in San Francisco. So Rockies did something that was, just the environment and playing with the Rockies definitely probably gave some of that offensive surge and confidence to Jeff Reed, especially in the twilight years of his career. Good for him.
Yeah, for sure. And that, like I was saying, is growing up and just hearing his name on the radio, and in those years, like you're saying, it was always like, oh, all of a sudden he's he could possibly hit a home run. And so as we talk about it, those memories pop up of that name in that time. And that's what's the super fun thing about it, as we go through and do a little research on these guys and see what they had. I also found that it was a funny stat, is he was the second actual Rocky to wear number 15. He's the first catcher so it was like the first Rockies to wear number 15. It was some like no name that played like a game, maybe, I don't even know. He was like one of those that the only picture that's available of him is with the Sky Sox.
Yeah.
And so there's just some of those funny little things. But during his time at that 96 season, some of the pitchers that he had some of those guys that were like that had, Armando Reynoso. He's one of the OG Rockies. Kevin Fritz, Mark Thompson, Marvin Freeman, Jamie Wright came up that year. When we do our Jamie Wright episode, that's where I fanboy because he was my guy. But Brian Ricard and Lance Painter, and then of course we have all those classic bullpen, that 1995-ish bullpen. But those guys were not. I guess like we were looking at the stats, they all had from just under 5 up to close to 7 ERAs. And you're like, holy cow, being a catcher for that, holy cow.
Yeah.
And we always got to remember, like, you don't remember as much because you kind of grew up into the baseball thing with the Rockies with the humidor. But, man, those days, those first few years at Coors Field when the ball would just blast off the bat, and, you felt bad for those pitchers out there because anything they threw was just had the chance to get blasted. But like a guy like Jeff Reed, gave him some consistency for those few years that he was there, and luckily, well, actually, not very luckily, because this guy or his other battery mate, he was one. If we put a list of like least favorite Rocky, or like, I don't know, the Rocky that just irritated you, his partner would have been on that list for me. And I know he's a great guy. I've read some stuff about him. Great guy. He was a great player, great teammate. But he just bugged me so much. And I just don't know why. And that was Kirt Manwaring.
Kirt Manwaring.
Oh, man.
Well, before we hit on him, I have one last thing here on Jeff Reed. I was trying to look of what he's been up to since his playing days. I think for a time he was the coach for the Elizabethton Twins for a while, and then he was head coach for the Providence Knights or Providence Academy, and he was a coach there. That's the most of what I can find. I don't know if he's still there or what he's doing, but there's time with the Rockies, and that finished out his career, went on as many players do into the coaching world.
Oh, so, yeah, that's what I bet he's. I'd hope so. He sounds like a pretty solid guy. He's still in it, still in the game, coaching somewhere in some capacity. So that's good.
Mm-hmm. So with that, like you alluded to, we can move on to his battery mate that he had, or his catching tandem partner in crime for the rest of his time with the Rockies was Kirt Manwaring, who kind of came in as the young, spry 31-year-old there for the 1997 season. And I guess what was kind of give us that breakdown there on Kirt Manwaring in his career now.
So Kirt Manwaring, he was a throw right, bat right kind of guy. He was born in 1965 in Elmira, New York. He was originally drafted by the Boston Red Sox in the 12th round of the '83 draft out of high school. But then he didn't end up going right away. So he was then drafted by the Giants in the second round of the '86 draft out of Coastal Carolina University in South Carolina. And he made his major league debut on September 15th, 1987. And he went hitless. His last game of his career was with the Rockies on October 3rd, 1999. And I'll get into that game here in a little bit because it was kind of a special one. He actually won a Gold Glove. Kirt Manwaring was known for defense. Okay, even more than Jeff Reed. Solid catcher. He was number 8 with the Rockies. And in his career, he played 10 years with the Giants, 3 years with Colorado, and 1 year before he went to the Rockies, he spent some time at Houston. So he, as I get my notes here, uh, he signed as a free agent in December of '96. So that's when the Rockies were like, well, this little Jayhawk Owens and whoever else aren't going to do it. So they picked up Kirt Manwaring in '96, and he was granted free agency. They signed him again, and he officially retired in 1999.
There you go.
Yeah, that's
when you, especially for him, when he's spending so much of his career with one team. That's pretty much what he is known for. That's where he had all the bulk of it. And then, like you were saying, kind of comes over to the Rockies as just kind of well, we need a catcher. This guy's probably the best defensively we can find. Let's bring him in to kind of shore up to help work with the pitching staff. And we'll take what we get with him.
Yeah, but Kirt Manwaring, like I said before, I don't know what it was with him, but I think it was because he was a Giant.
Mm-hmm.
He was a San Francisco Giant, and I just did not like that about him. And maybe I'm just a bad guy, but it's like Kirt this guy. Like, I always remember, like, he can't hit. We're used to Jeff Reed being able to, put the ball in play for a double and get a home run. And it seemed like Kirt Manwaring couldn't do anything. This is in my 10-year-old mind, what was I, 12? And I just dreaded hearing Kirt Manwaring. I feel bad now as an older guy. I'm like, why did I hate this guy so much? He was a nice guy. I just did not like him.
Yeah, and I could see that coming out of the production where you have Jeff Reed, who probably had a little bit more better slugging, could hit for that power, and then Kirt Manwaring kind of around that 340 range, low 300 to mid 300s for his slugging. So we can understand that. He seemed to be like that prototypical of this is our backup catcher for these days because he's good defensively and comes in with that gold glove in his career. Once you have that gold glove, you've always got it. And that's probably same thing with Jeff Reed. They wanted a guy that good defensively that could help handle the pitching staff as best they could.
Oh man, but I just see, that. Oh, I feel bad because I hate on him so much, but he was part of that '97 team. That they they had a really good rate. He played in 104 games in that '97 season, and didn't batted 226, struck out a ton, and grounded into a bunch of double plays. But with that team, looking at them too, and I'm like, sheesh, how did those guys end up winning so many games? But he was there that '97, '98, and then that '99 season is the one that that he ended up retiring. That's when old Jim Leland was running things. That disaster of a mess. And the Rockies had Henry Blanco is catching. Now, Henry Blanco, a lot of people will remember him and know him with the Cubs. And he's a coach and everything. So, that was Kirt Manwaring. He only played 48 games in that last season. But he batted 299 that year. And they had the debut of Ben Petrick That's a name that sparks a lot of people's ears. But Kirt Manwaring, uh, like I was saying before, on that last year that he played, that '99 season, it he didn't. I found an article about it that the Rockies had already told him, like, "Hey, man, you're done after this. Like, you're not coming back. Good luck with what you want to do." And so he hadn't played. He hadn't started a game for like 2 months. And Jim Leland on the last game of the season gave him a start, and he actually hit a run scoring double and a 2-run homer, and he threw a guy out. It was kind of cool in that article where I would have been just kind of like, good riddance. Like, I'm glad I'm done. I'm glad I'm out of here. And he was just like, knowing that it was the end. It says this is from an article from Mike Kliss from the Denver Post, and this is what like softened my heart and made me feel like a complete jerk. Is the things that he had to say about him. It was nice. It was nice to catch the last game of the season because you never know, said Manwaring, whose first time with the Rockies as a free agent following the '96 season. It's definitely my last game as a Rocky. Unfortunately, we didn't win in my 3 years here because it's a good city. It'll probably hit me Monday that I won't be playing for the Rockies anymore or for anybody else. And I'm glad for the 3 years here, though. You got a great bunch of guys, and this is a place where you just feel fortunate that you got to play. And so, that was that. And then it made me feel bad because it's like he says at the end, "I'm going to go home and relax this winter and see if anyone calls, and then sit down with my wife and kids and talk about what we should do." And he ultimately decided to hang it up. And so, Kirt Manwaring, I am very sorry. I put so much hate and dislike towards you because looking at it, you didn't deserve that. You don't, from my insignificant self.
See, that's the beauty of this very special episode of Every Rockie Ever, where you can see someone's heart soften before your very eyes over the course of a half an hour. No, but I like that sentiment where, as I would think, especially during the '90s era, where Rockies fandom and Denver was just so supportive and just enthralled by the fact that they had a baseball team. And you saw that year after year in Colorado and in Denver. Ever since 1993, through that whole decade, people were excited and loved to support the Rockies. Win or lose, they were out there supporting their guys. And it's cool to see of guys at that time able to have that sentiment about the Rockies, because we like the modern day Rockies. It's pretty easy to trash on them, and with all the problems that they have as an organization, and certain feuds that they've had with players and that have driven them away. It's always nice to hear the stories of guys that liked being here, and even if they weren't a big part of the team, but they had the opportunity to be there and be part of that environment. It's pretty cool to hear.
Oh yeah, and that's and then it makes me feel like a lot of these guys went on. There's tons of those former Rockies guys that went on to coach and share their knowledge and helping develop other players. And that's something that I look back and I'm like, I wonder if the Rockies could do a little more now at getting, we had Walter Weiss experiment, and Dante Bichette came back for a year to hitting coach and stuff like that.
They've had EY as a coach on the base, a base coach.
They got Vinny Castillo right now doing his thing that I just waiting for the time he gets, a managerial, an actual coaching spot. But Jeff Reed and Kirt Manwaring, the way they went about the game uh, I think the Rockies could, could use something like that because Kirt Manwaring, of course, went back to the Giants, and he was a, a, a catching instructor for them, and good for him. He belongs with the Giants,
Mm-hmm.
but I do appreciate those 3 years. Now,
Yeah, yeah. Looking back on his career, he worked with the Giants as a catching instructor for 16 years. I actually found his page here on LinkedIn, and so 16 years he was with a coach with the Giants, and looks like that ended in 2017. So maybe he's just enjoying retirement and being an old man these days.
yeah, you look at those catchers. And we talk about the Coors Field effect. Imagine what did Colorado Rockies catchers go through? And
Mm-hmm.
especially in those times that those games were no 2.5 hours.
Mm-hmm.
And going through that grind, you gain an appreciation for what the physical toll that their bodies take on bringing us that entertainment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's always the one thing that we always talk about, or people would always ask me growing up, what position can you play? I'm like, oh, pretty much everything but catcher, because
Yes.
my knees couldn't handle it. We're tall guys, and we can't. It's the strain it puts on a guy's body on their knees. We've caught bullpens. I used to have to catch you throwing to me, and I don't like crouching. And for those guys to do it as long as they did over the course of a major league career for nearly over a decade, nearly 2 decades, and for them to do it in Colorado with the wackiness of Coors Field environment and those offenses pre-humidor in the big leagues, it's big props to them, and cool that they get to be part of the Rockies, I guess, lore and history.
Yeah, and especially for me, they were the first time I really thought of, a two catcher system.
Mm-hmm.
Looking at the numbers, I was like, because I could have sworn that Kirt Manwaring was always ahead of Jeff Reed. Like I always felt like Jeff Reed was that, the end of the last game of the series catcher, and I didn't realize that 96 he was the guy. And then Manwaring, and then they kind of, even then it just didn't. I always just felt like Kirt Manwaring had more. Uh, more playing time than Jeff Reed.
Mm-hmm.
But again, we're going to our nostalgia of, me as a 12-year-old kid trying to remember, 11, 12-year-old kid remembering these guys.
Mm-hmm.
But that's what we like to do, for everyone, is get those memories sparked, and maybe you can have a change of heart like I did with Kirt Manwaring. Or it will fire you up and put you back into, oh, I remember that guy, or whatever. It's kind of fun, and teaching those of you from this younger generation that had no idea these guys existed.
Yeah, like even me, we said these guys, some of these Jeff Reed started playing for the Rockies when before I was even born, in 1996, and so these aren't guys I experienced. But what's nice about this is hearing these stories from Dustin, and kind of his experience growing up with the Rockies for some of these guys that aren't even on my radar for my pantheon of Rockies and who I think of when I think of Rockies baseball. I'm more of them modern guys now.
But when we talk about our all-time Rockies, these two guys for me are nowhere close to the best of the best, the most memorable. They're not there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, especially in terms of catchers, and we'll definitely talk about some of the other more notable catchers as we go on with the podcast. But yeah, these guys are 20 more years down the line. People will hear those names like, who? But we can take away they were really good defensively. One of them had a couple of good years offensively, and One was Kirt Manwaring.
Oh.
But they still got to live out the dream and got to experience
Yep.
Rockies baseball. So we'll still support them in that way, even if they did play for the Giants a lot. But I think that'll do it here for that catching tandem here. Before we started recording, Dustin was worried that we're not going to have much to talk about, but we filled up quite a bit of time here.
Oh, I get to babbling and reminiscing and getting back to, it puts me back in time to these specific moments, like I said, and that's what's crazy as we do this, because things come up and I'm like, oh man, I just totally remember these moments.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's baseball has that staying power. Even the most random guys have that staying power of, oh yeah, I remember this about this player and everything. So it's always a fun time, and as always, we appreciate you joining along with us and supporting the show and listen to our memories. And as always, we encourage you to share that feedback, share it around on Twitter, and share your memories when we post the episode, and let us know what memories and thoughts you have about Kirt Manwaring and Jeff Reed and any of the other players that we've done so far. And that's going to bring it to a close here for Every Rockie Ever. You can follow us on Twitter at Every Rockie Ever. You can also follow the at Rocky MTN Rooftop on Twitter. And that's kind of the main account for everything. We'll post all this stuff there. And you can follow me at sideline_crowd. And you'll always hear me writing for Purple Row. And then you can find Dustin at Mr. T Spanish. He's not as active on there.
I don't do much on the Twitter, but TikTok and Instagram stuff, I do that of trick shots and my little random things here and there. But I need to start throwing out some more baseball content out on Twitter.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, if it's not Hasbulla, it'll be baseball.
Yeah. But we're all in, like you said, we're always open for other suggestions of who do you guys want to hear about? Who should we talk about and start bringing back, taking us down memory lane for your favorite Rockies ever.
Yeah, always let us know. I always appreciated when people would do that. When I would do Every Rockie Ever and just posting players, and somebody would put up, hey, when are you going to post so-and-so? And then I'd usually see that, and that'd be the next one I'd do. So we're here to do this for you, and we'll reminisce, but we also want to reminisce with you and who you guys want to talk about, what memories you have on them. But that'll do it here for this edition. As always, again, thank you for joining us. I'm Skyler. That's Dustin. And as always, we'll be here next time here on Every Rockie Ever. Until then, farewell.
Adios.
Farewell.